I know Janice is coming, but she's running a little behind, so we'll go ahead and get the first part, done here. I just want to thank you, everybody, for coming. It's really nice to be able to start to meet in person, and hopefully we'll someday fill up the room, but I really appreciate you all coming tonight because I think it'll be a really interesting program. When I was trying to come up with something for devotions tonight, I thought I would look for Bible verses that had something to do with singing, given that our speaker's book touches on that subject. And as you can imagine, there are a multitude of verses in the Bible that refer to singing. So these are the ones I chose, and maybe they'll have an even deeper meaning after our speaker's presentation tonight. The first one is from Psalms. It's chapter 59, verse 16. But I will sing of thy might, I will sing aloud of thy steadfast love in the morning. I guess I can take this off, sorry. I will start over. But I will sing of thy might, I will sing aloud of thy steadfast love in the morning. For thou hast been to me a fortress and a refuge in the day of my distress. The next one is Psalm 71, verse 23. My lips will shout for joy when I sing praises to thee, my soul also, which thou hast rescued. And the last one is Psalm 100, verses 1 through 5. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with singing. Know that the Lord is God. It is he that made us, and we are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Bless his name. For the Lord is good. His steadfast love endures forever, and his faithfulness to all generations. And so now I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker, Andy Douglas. Andy received an MFA in creative writing from the nonfiction writing program at the University of Iowa, where he received the Marcus Bach Fellowship for writing about religion and culture. His first book, The Curve of the World into the Spiritual Heart of Yoga, was published in 2013. He writes a monthly column for the Press Citizen and is active in peace and justice issues. He also sings with the Community Sing movement. For 6 years, Andy volunteered with Oakdale Community Choir, a performing chorale composed of both volunteers and inmates at the correctional facility in Coralville. Tonight, he will share some of the experiences and insights he writes about in his book, Redemption Songs, A Year in the Life of a Community Prison Choir. And now, Andy Douglas. Please welcome Andy Douglas. Turn this off before I pull it out of there.
It's a good sign. If I can figure out how to pop it in. Okay, great. All right. I'm going to unmask myself. Well, thank you, Beth, for that introduction. And thank you all. Can you hear me? All right. Thank you all for coming tonight. This is a real joy. Beth originally invited me to give this talk probably 14 months ago, and a little something happened along the way. So it's really a joy to be able to be in person with you all as we're moving more and more in that direction. I feel a little rusty, so please forgive any rustiness. I thought tonight I would offer a few opening remarks, and then we could see a video of the choir. Some of you may have seen this video, but I think it's a very good representation of the work that's being done out there. And then I'm going to read a chapter from the book, and then I thought I'd open it up to questions and discussion. Some of you may have had experiences volunteering in prisons, and I'd love to hear about your experience as well. A drink first. I volunteered in the Oakdale Community Choir for 7 years. The choir started in 2009 and has gone until COVID hit. It's not functioning at the moment. The choir was started by University of Iowa professor and dynamo Mary Cohen. She has really done remarkable work in creating this sense of community in a place where community is often at a premium. For a while, there were about 30 community volunteers, men and women, and 30 incarcerated men. And we would come together once a week for an hour and a half. And Mary was she's a very highly musical and competent professional. So our time together was very structured, and it was very much like any other choir, performing choir you might think of. But there was also time for interaction, for exercises, for community building, and just getting to know these men who were incarcerated out there. And I have to say, in the beginning, of course, I felt a little trepidation going into the prison. I had no idea what it would be like. Some of these people might be dangerous. We project all sorts of thoughts and feelings onto the people that we incarcerate in this country. I'll talk a little bit more later about the extent to which we rely on incarceration and maybe if there are alternatives to that we could explore. But my hesitation after the first couple weeks really started to dissipate because these guys were so kind and so interested in doing this work together, and so grateful and so open to becoming friends. And the Department of Corrections advised us ahead of time, you're not there to become friends with these people. But I have to say that if you sing next to someone for 6 years, once a week, you're going to become friends with them. And that's exactly what happened. A lot of friendships developed, a lot of sharing of stories. As outsiders, we have to be careful not to share too much information. That's sort of the protocol. And we also didn't ask the men, for example, what their crime was. It wasn't important. We were entering a space where everyone came with the same value and the same sense of dedication to the project. And that was a beautiful thing because most of the time these men often they felt discarded, they felt forgotten, certainly they felt like their lives had been ruined. So to create a program, an arts program, an education program, a choir in a prison is something that really brings a sense of hope and offers these men a voice. And everyone wants to have a voice in their lives, no matter what our past is, no matter what we've done. I write in the book that the choir is based on the principle of Ubuntu. Are you familiar with this word? South African word meaning we are because of all of us together. We are who we are because of other people. And that was really the sense and the feeling that Mary Cohen tried to instill into the group, the sense of we are one community, and every part of that community is important. You know, the atmosphere in prison, often there's this sense of everything is controlled. And there's a sense of hopelessness often. So this makes the central idea at the core of the choir that every person should have the opportunity to grow and find meaning that much more important. Just to read to you the orientation packet which spells out the choir's goals. To empower participants to embrace the joys of hard work for a meaningful purpose. To build companionship rooted in sharing oneself and responding to others. To gain confidence that each one of us can contribute to a greater good and learn to honor who we are as individuals and as a community. And you can imagine many of these men, they're coming in from very traumatic circumstances. And I by no means want to excuse or overlook the crimes that these men have committed. But to focus on the crimes is not the purpose of this work. It's not the purpose of the restorative justice approach. That's another concept that I'd like to talk more about, restorative justice, a little bit later. We don't focus on the past, we look into the future. And a lot of these guys have come, as I said, broken families, addictions, very difficult circumstances. Some of the typical inmate behaviors that Mary Cohen tried to address with this work, they have a need for instant gratification. They don't stop and think often, and I'm generalizing, of course, but they may not take personal responsibility for things. They have weakly developed social skills. They're not able to interact so easily. And so these are some of the things that Mary hoped to address through the project of creating something beautiful together, creating something spontaneous and beautiful in a place that there's very little beauty and there's very little spontaneity, you know? So you can imagine the kind of impact bringing beauty or offering beauty or sharing beauty in a place like this could have on men who have very little of it in their lives. Why don't we take a look at the video, and then after that we can continue from there.
Prison is a lot about taking your humanity. Restorative justice is first about making the person feel human again.
In choir, you're not viewed as an offender, you're viewed as a person.
In the field of community music, we practice the theory of the welcome and hospitality.
93% of the 8,000 some inmates that are in prison will someday walk out. The real measure of our success isn't what happens on the inside, it's what happens when they go to the outside. Prison life is boring. You might have a menial job that you have to take care of for a few hours, but for the rest of the time it's just trying to figure out what you're going to do with your day. We all kind of like those days once, but imagine doing that 365 days.
I started out doing prison time in Fort Madison and Anamosa, and they didn't have outside guests or anything. So when I got to Oakdale, a buddy of mine's like, hey man, you should join the choir.
2 years after I got here, the choir started, and it was, I'm not a joiner. I don't join things. And then my buddy Bailey came in and said, all right, you like singing, you're coming down to this.
She Choose a pitch, any pitch, and let it sustain.
Half of the choir is made up of outside volunteers and half of the choir is inside.
If you walked by, you wouldn't know which ones of us are incarcerated and which ones of us are leaving in a few hours.
At first, it wasn't for me. I wasn't gonna go, I wasn't going to get into it. But then I met Dr. Cohen, and she encouraged me to at least try songwriters. And wrote a song, and she liked it, and people liked it.
Let's crack the sky. Let's crack the sky.
To write a song, I didn't think I could do that. Singing, I absolutely know I could not do that. And Miss Mary was like, everybody can sing.
I've been researching this for 16 years, and I'm writing a book about music education in prisons. The field of music education is at a place where we want to start to expand how music education can impact human lives in a positive way. The biggest part of this project really is to create communities of caring.
I first came in 2009 when Dr. Mary Cohen began the Oakdale Choir. I learned so much by coming in about the struggles that people go through. Hearing stories is an encouragement to me when I'm discouraged.
I've been in the choir about 8 years. The people that were there, they were my visits. They were my weekly visit. Because I didn't have visits for like 7 years.
It's changed people's perception of what prison is. I got the chance to meet a world-famous choir and sing with them. I got to meet Maggie Wheeler and sing with her and perform one of her songs. And that's all due to Warden McKinney allowing more and more things to come in for rehabilitation and not just punishment.
You have a community that you formed in here. That's a model of what you need to do when you get out.
We kind of have this idea that if they're in prison, they get out, they're going to go off into some far-off land. That's not true. They're going to live next door to somebody. And that somebody might be you, might be me, and it might be my granddaughters. I've just been very fortunate in my career that I've been running a facility since 1985. I've realized that if I treat the guys with respect, I get a lot of it back. And I've never had an issue. What makes people safe is when they learn how to relate to people, to communicate with people, to start thinking about others instead of just themselves.
All right, are we ready, Paul? All right, team. Remember the message. Sing it from your soul.
And for 2 hours on a Tuesday night, nobody thinks they're in prison.
Fast enough?
I knew that I had a life sentence. I knew that this was my life. I could either do the rest of my life in lockup and behind a cell and as an animal, or I could attempt to, try to get my mind right. I came with an open mind, and I wrote maybe 13 songs. It allowed me to be part of something good that was connected with the outside, but also something good that was connected with the inside.
You know, you're in prison, you have life, but the gang life, that's not who you are. And when you come to a camp like this and see the choir and see how open it is, you start to feel human again. This is the first prison I've ever been in where there's more positive going on than negative. And that's a heck of a thing for a prison.
It's beautiful, huh? I feel moved every time I see that, seeing some of my old friends there. So I thought, should we take a moment for questions and comments about the video? If anyone has anything they want to say? Yes.
The Methodists have a church, a congregation inside there, and we used to be able to visit them.
Uh-huh.
Oh, we haven't, for several years, for some reason. It was before COVID that we quit going over there.
Uh-huh.
But that was always a powerful experience for many of us, to go over, and they encourage you to sit with the prisoners, not with your friends, which was always, the first time was a little, it wasn't really scary, but it was intimidating, I guess. And of course, like you said, you don't share any personal information or things like that, but that was a good experience for many of us from St. Mark's.
Wonderful.
I had the opportunity to attend one of the concerts a year ago, Christmas. There's someone I know where I live who has been singing in that for quite a long time. You may have met her. But it is a powerful experience, and you forget that they're incarcerated, that they're just human beings, and they let you talk afterwards. You could visit and say, we enjoyed it. And what really amazed me is how many of them write songs and poems. They did quite a bit of that. And so it was a very powerful experience.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you were able to attend one of the concerts. I'm hoping that the choir will reconvene in the future, and I encourage everybody to attend one of those concerts.
I was lucky to attend like 5 years ago, and I was also very moved. The other thing I thought was really wonderful was the dogs, that the prisoners would be responsible for taking care of certain dogs that were getting trained day and night. They'd have to take them outside in the middle of the night or whatever.
Yes.
But it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. So thank you for doing all that.
Yeah, the previous warden, McKinney, we saw him in the video, was very good, very open and very forward-thinking about bringing in as many programs like dog training, like these various volunteer activities as possible, because as he says in the movie or in the video, these men, many of them will be released. They'll be living next to people. They'll be back and part of the community. So it's incumbent on everyone to find ways to rehabilitate, to find ways to help them understand themselves and to better themselves and to work through the problems that landed them in prison, you know. And I'm also a big fan of the dog program. Sometimes the men would bring their dogs to choir rehearsal, and you know, we'd have some song where we were making a lot of noise, and then, you know, one of the dogs would chime in. I think I'm going to read a chapter from the book. You got a visual for the choir. Maybe this will fill in some of the gaps. This is the last chapter in the book. I think I'm going to read the whole thing, if you'll bear with me. And this deals with one of the concerts. And we would give 2 concerts every spring and every fall. One for other incarcerated men. They would come to one of the concerts, and then another one for the community. And some of you may know it was a hot ticket. It was a very popular concert, and a lot of people attended, and it was really an amazing thing. So this chapter is entitled, "A Change is Going to Come." A warm breeze is blowing up from the south as pink buds appear on the crabapple trees outside the prison. It's concert day again. Insiders arrive at the gym early. I should say insiders are incarcerated men and outsiders are how we refer to community people, in order to deal with logistics. They set up rows of chairs, roll in the piano, and those with a technological bent unspool the wires for the sound system and do sound checks. Armand has been planning a speech. He wanders in, distracted, going over some notes he's been revising. Soon the outside choir members file into the gym and greet the insiders, milling around until Mary calls for our attention. She climbs onto the podium wearing her purple "Love Lives On" t-shirt with the Oakdale Community Choir logo across the back, the same shirt we are all wearing, purple for outsiders, green for insiders. She has a message for us. I want to congratulate you all on the progress you've made this past year. In terms of the choir's overall blended sound, you've made great strides. We nod, smiling. Yep, that's us, well blended in more ways than one. A few people exchange high fives. Meanwhile, concert guests are navigating the protocol to enter the prison, passing through the metal detector, clipping on their temporary badges, having been briefed on what to wear and how to behave. In the free moments before the concert begins, I strike up a conversation with a middle-aged white man named Trent. On the outside, he was an accountant. As an inmate, he says, he's working with a recovery group that combines the 12 steps of AA with the 8 points of the Beatitudes. You get real with yourself, with what you've done, he tells me, in this program. You can look in the mirror and see who you really are. The group addresses all kinds of addictions, drugs, alcohol, sex. He wants to continue to work with it after he's released. Addiction is just a way of filling a hole in yourself, he tells me. You may stop drinking because you got married, but then you fall into overeating. You have to have a healthy approach. As we rejoin our sections and watch the visitors file in, I think about the parents and relatives attending this concert, who afterwards will get to visit their sons or husbands or brothers for a few moments. Many of these visitors will be recognized and introduced to the audience by their insider connections during the concert. These inside singers are visibly excited. You can see how much the visit means to them. I wonder what the parents might be feeling. Shame that their son is in prison? Pride that they're doing all right, that they're involved in things like singing in the choir? It's probably a complicated mix of emotions. Time to begin. A hush falls over the gymnasium. Mary raises her hands and brings us in on the first song. We open, as usual, with "Beauty Before Me." But this time, the choir starts out singing in a structured way, then slowly dissolves into free-form singing, improvising as we have done in numerous rehearsals throughout the year, building on what we've been learning, the notes ringing out in the way each singer discerns the need to sing them. Armand looks up at the chart hanging from Mary's podium, listing the order of the concert. He takes a deep breath. His moment will not happen until near the end of the concert. We search in our folders for Homeward Bound, and Amy takes the mic to introduce it. This song talks of physical and spiritual journeys, of growth and change. We should all be free to choose where we propel our positive energies. Think of the relationship between parents and children. If we're allowed to discover what we want to do in this life and who we want to be, we'll come back to those who loved us enough to allow us to live our own lives and trusted that we would return. The piano opens plaintively. The women's high voices set the mood, and the men respond. In the quiet, misty morning, when the moon has gone to bed, if you find it's me you're missing, if you're hoping I'll return, to your thought I'll soon be listening. In the road I'll stop and turn. It's a gorgeous, poignant song, and might spur the reflective listener to ask, when am I given moments in my life to stop, turn, and listen? One of the insiders now steps up to the mic. People Get Ready is about preparing for a new way of life, he says. Getting ready to live outside these walls, trying to live each day with love and peace as if it were my last. I'm working on my family relationships. I want my wife and daughter to be able to trust me. So I'm taking some classes to learn about the only thing I can control, my attitude about myself and others, and how I respond to situations. My goal for the future is to build on controlling anger, getting a job, returning to loved ones, and becoming a productive person and community. I hope someday I can use my own positive actions to influence others. So, people get ready. There's laughter and clapping as we launch into the song, a beautiful soul hit, which concludes with us harmonizing on the line, I'm getting ready, this time I'm ready. Listening to the sentiments expressed in both the introductions and the songs, I remember what another volunteer told me recently. An insider said to her, I used to not be a very nice person, but I'm different now. This reminds me that what we call things invests them with power. I've become more conscious about how I refer to the people in the choir. Inmate, convict, offender. Such words define people by the worst thing they've ever done and don't imply the possibility of change. Person in prison, insider, returning citizen, these convey a different sense. Or how about inside artist, writer, or musician? There are two main narratives people seem to hold in relation to the imprisoned. The first is that most people in prison are dangerous criminals, hardened to human feeling, unforgivable. The other is that people in prison are flawed human beings, trying to figure out how to better themselves, atone for their crimes, and move forward with their lives. Obviously, there's a kernel of truth in both narratives. Violent people do exist inside, though I believe that even the most hardened can change. And men and women who have come to a point of actively seeking redemption in their lives are in prison as well. There are two wolves living in each person, the Cherokee saying goes. One resentful, one generous. Which wolf wins? The one you feed. I think back to Mary Cohen's research questions. Can typical inmate behaviors, the need for instant gratification, a lack of personal and social responsibility, and weakly developed social skills be addressed, even modified to some degree, through the discipline of singing in a choir? I think the answer has become clear. Human beings have a fundamental need to experience personal power, power and autonomy. If a person is causing harm because they're not feeling powerful, then taking more power away from them isn't going to be helpful. The solution may be to help them experience power, give them a voice in a way that doesn't take away someone else's power. I'm pulled from my reverie as Armand steps to the mic, the process of preparation these last few days buzzing through his being. He's nervous but ready. Being locked up, he begins, gazing out at the crowd. You find out who is with you and who isn't. When you're out and running free, you may think you have a lot of friends. But in here, you find out it's all about family at the end of the day. I'm thinking about my sister and my family who has stuck with me. Well, I run into beautiful sisters and brothers here inside, too. He flashes a grin at the choir. What kind of drugs are these people on? What would make you want to come in with a group of felons and treat us like one big family? And Dr. Cohen, who do you think you are, telling me I'm a superstar? When others said I was unfit. Is this some kind of joke? Folks don't act like this in real life. Don't you know you're standing next to criminals? He turns and addresses the choir directly. You're all my sisters and brothers. With his moment of honest humor, Armand has punctured some stereotypical assumptions, just as he's done with the songs he's written all along. He's to be transferred soon, moving on, and I know this is on his mind. For the moment, though, he's connecting with everyone in the gym. The audience is laughing, and we're all grinning wildly. Smiling, Armand sits down. Another man, a middle-aged white insider, comes to the front to introduce our last song. A change is going to come, reminds me of my own journey. He stands before the microphone and says, it seems I've been running all my life, running from authority, running from relationships, and from my own mistakes. There have been many changes in my life, and I know there will be more. Though the past has been dark, I've developed new ways of thinking to challenge old patterns. Mary steps up and, as usual, encourages us to smile. As the Sam Cooke lyrics begin to fill the gym, the audience perks up in nostalgic recognition. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is going to come. Oh, yes, it will. A trombone rings out above our voices, brass tones swelling the air and echoing off the ceiling. The soloist lifts his voice in hopeful melodic flow, then brings the song home with soulful aplomb. As we come to the end, the audience erupts in wild applause. We look around at each other, basking in the love. I catch Terrence's eye, and he smiles. It was a pretty good performance, not without its flaws, but we're all pretty happy. Some of the men set out juice and cookies, always a big draw, and we step out into the crowd. So I don't know what time we started or how much time we have. Excuse me. Okay. If you like, we can have some conversation about restorative justice, about prison system. Those are things that I know I said earlier I would talk more about, and I can if you like. If you have questions, I can field your questions. Let's have a conversation.
I just wondered, how do you pick out the songs?
That's a great question. So I think that's changed over the years. It used to be Mary would just pick the songs, and I think the guiding principle is just having things that are uplifting and positive and are about personal change. So, you heard some of the songs I mentioned, some soul tunes like Change is Gonna Come, Let People Get Ready. We do some gospel songs. We do some traditional songs. African tunes like Wo Ya Ya. I don't know if you know that song. There's a beautiful song called Lead with Love that was written not too long ago that has been incorporated. But more and more, with the development of the songwriting workshop, we're singing songs that are written by the men themselves. So Mary started the songwriting workshop with a couple of volunteers. I don't remember now when it was, I mentioned it in the book, but maybe 6-7 years ago. And it gave training to men in basic music theory, in writing lyrics, and in putting those things together. And so every week before rehearsal, a group of men would gather with, maybe some scribbled notes that they had and just bounce ideas off the other men in the group and off some of the volunteers who have very great musical talent. I should say many of the men have a tremendous musical talent as well, and then songs would grow out of that. And probably at least a third, if not more, of the songs we've been singing in recent years were songs by insiders, which are often very poignant, because they're laying it all out there. They're getting their feelings out, their regrets, their longing for home, all these things. There's been, and sometimes Mary has brought a song to the choir that people really just didn't like. So, to her credit, she's open to some feedback from the group. That's the basic process.
Does this make a big difference in who returns to the prison and who doesn't, the music?
It's an excellent question. So this question of recidivism, there's a lot of research going on about that. Mary Cohen is doing a lot of research into the effects of prison choirs on recidivism also. But even before this choir was started, there had been a lot of research. And what the research shows clearly is that when prisoners, insiders have educational opportunities, when they have artistic opportunities like choir, band, writing groups, they are less likely to recidivate. There's evidence demonstrating that. So it becomes frustrating when you encounter attitudes in some places of cutting arts programs, cutting education programs, put them away and throw away the key, In my research for the book, I sort of did research into the history of rehabilitative programs in prisons. And it seems like in our society, there's always a kind of pendulum going on. Politicians will get the idea that they have to appear tough in order to get votes, and so they'll be anti-program in the prisons, But then something will happen, there'll be a shift in the society, and people will see that, or the argument that that people being released into society have to have some kind of therapy or education or something. And there's also been a lot of research looking at prisons in other countries. For example, Norway has an incredible correctional system, and many of their prisons, I've seen videos of one in particular. You don't feel like you're in a prison. It's very light and airy. The men come and go and interact with the correctional officers. They cook their own food. It just feels, they're deprived of their liberty, but it's an opportunity for them to develop themselves, you know. And the society understands the importance of that. Our society, you can say not everybody understands that completely, you know, or they may pay lip service to it. So yes, absolutely, there's evidence that singing in a choir, but also getting a degree, you know, getting a college degree or a GED will make a huge difference in whether someone stays clean when they're outside. Yeah.
Is there a screening process for anybody who wants to be in the choir? Because it seems to me that if you had time with outsiders during the week, that would be a way to get away from being isolated.
Mm-hmm.
So how are they screened? I know in Mitchellville, certain people who've had problems with not behaving,
Mm-hmm.
can't come to church.
Yeah, Yeah, I believe that anyone who's in the general population can join the choir. So when men enter Oakdale, and Oakdale, you may or may not know, is the entry point for the entire state. Everyone who enters the system in Iowa starts out at Oakdale, and they're assessed and evaluated. They're given points according to their behavior, et cetera. And there's a few months of that process, evaluation process. Then either they're transferred to another prison or they become part of the general population, which basically does the work of the prison, you know. So as far as I understand, anyone who's in the general population is free to join the choir. Yeah. Yeah. Many choose not to, you know, for whatever reason, attitude issues. Yeah, I don't know, but I think that a lot of the men who have joined because they saw how much fun their cellmates were having or their friends were having, you know. Yeah. Yes.
What about
Oh, here.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Beth.
We had multiple questions.
Yeah. How do outsiders become involved? Is there a screening process for them as well?
It's been a long time. It was 2011 when I joined. It's not a screening process per se. There's an orientation process. So you have to go in and spend a morning there finding out about the prison and the rules and those basic things. I don't think there's any background check as far as I remember. Yeah. So I think anyone is free to join. And one of the cool things is that the choir's been around long enough now that some former insiders who were released are coming in as outsiders. At least one guy that I know. And that is very inspiring, you know? Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about, if you'd speak a little more about the restorative justice. About 30 years ago, B.B. Clark, who was a legislator in Iowa, was very instrumental in getting that program going. I haven't heard much in recent years. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to that, if they're doing any of that?
I know that there is an office of restorative justice in Iowa, and the director does things like, she works both with offenders and with victims, and that's another whole piece of the puzzle, is the rights of victims, and that's something that we who are volunteering with offenders or with incarcerated men try very hard to acknowledge and be sensitive to, and not ignore. So this woman, she holds workshops, restorative justice workshops. Occasionally, she will facilitate if a victim wants to meet the person who offended against them. She will facilitate those meetings. And then there are a whole slew of other kinds of programs, like something called Alternatives to Violence program, which is a weekend training for insiders where facilitators come in and help them work with their anger issues. They do role playing, they do games, and it's a series of weekends where they're basically trying to incorporate into their own lives alternatives to the ways that they used to behave, to react impulsively, violently, that kind of thing. I have a couple notes here about restorative justice. Maybe I'll just read what I prepared. This is very general. Restorative justice focuses on the process of accountability for those who have committed crimes, helping them understand the impact their behavior has had on others, and responding to and repairing that harm. A related approach, transformative justice, focuses on changing the social conditions that lead to crime and imprisonment. Iowa attorney Bruce Kittle, who has served as a prison chaplain, describes restorative justice this way: the community is not left on the sidelines to watch, but invited to be actively involved in the neighborhoods and communities in not only responding to crime, but expressing community values and creating resources and opportunities that eventually result in the reduction of crime. Buzz Alexander writes about a remarkable event he witnessed, epitomizing this approach. In a Canadian Indigenous community, elders gathered for a sentencing circle. They apologized to the wayward youth whose sentence they were determining. "We did something wrong in raising you," they said, "or you would not be standing here before us." That just seems like such a remarkable thing to do. Instead of castigating, blaming, shaming, this person is a part of the community, we value them, we pull them back into the community, and we apologize for the lapses of not helping them, to grow. Such awareness of the way the offender is connected to the community is at the heart of restorative justice. The understanding that when violence is perpetrated, the community itself frays. Achieving justice means offering understanding, healing, and restoration for all involved. This, of course, includes the victim. A crucial aspect of restorative justice lies in supporting crime victims and their needs. Kittle adds, the engaged and inclusive process itself transforms people. And when people are transformed, they in turn transform their communities and eventually the system. This is not a top-down process, but one that builds from the foundation of a community up. So again, that idea of helping people who have committed crimes to take responsibility and then to atone for the crime. And that can be so healing personally for someone who's been involved in criminal activity, I'm sure many of these men feel very badly about what they've done and feel a sense of guilt and shame. Does that address your question? Yeah. Other things I prepared to talk about. The science of music, the effect that music has on people, it creates dopamine, it's a feel-good chemical, and also oxytocin, which is a bonding chemical. So singing in the choir has all these wonderful health benefits. It slows the brain waves, helps us breathe more deeply and slowly, oxygenating the blood, regulates blood pressure, etc. And also, I touch a little bit on the book about the idea of neuroplasticity. Are you all familiar with this term? Neuroplasticity is a term which refers to the brain's ability to modify its behavior at any age. Not just young people, but old people as well have the ability to reshape the chemistry and the plasticity of their brain. And so through positive social activities, through positive reinforcement, through community building, the brain can be trained to react and to act in a more positive fashion. And that's what neuroplasticity is teaching. I think, did you have another question?
I was just going to ask if there have been any other choirs in any prisons that sort of spin off.
In Iowa.
Yeah, Iowa.
There was one in Mount Pleasant for a while. It really takes a kind of a very committed, dynamic person to keep a choir going. There was a choir there for a while. I don't think it lasted. And I'm not aware of a choir in other places. I know that there are writing groups, for example, in Anamosa and Mitchellville also. It's interesting. A group of us went to the facility at Newton a couple years ago because many of the inside singers had been transferred to Newton, so we knew a lot of these guys. And we went and we sang with them, just an afternoon visit. Oh, I read from my book. I think maybe that was the impetus for going there. And we sang with them and talked with them, and they were like, this place, there's nothing to do. They had no activities. They had very little educational opportunities, no artistic opportunities. We just felt so bad after having seen them thrive in Oakdale, and now just sitting and spinning their wheels, So it's very much up to the warden of a particular prison, what kind of approach they want to take as far as how open they are to volunteer activities. It would be great if every prison had that opportunity. Yeah, there are many choirs developing, or before COVID, around the country. Mary Cohen keeps track of those, and it's a growing trend, not hugely, but slowly. Yeah.
Are you aware of any research that's being done related to funding for programs within prisons, and kind of adjacent to that, the kind of attitudes of correctional officers that have an impact on people that are incarcerated?
Yeah. It used to be that insiders could apply for Pell Grants in order to study in college. And I think it was I need to read my own book again. I think it was in the 90s that Congress stopped that eligibility for Pell Grants, which was just a ridiculous decision. It's coming back slowly now in some places. A few prisons are offering that again in the last couple of years. But, here was this fantastic opportunity for insiders to continue their education, and there was some sense that we shouldn't be coddling prisoners or something like that, So I can't speak really in depth to the question of funding for these activities. Most of them are volunteer activities, so there's not a lot of expense, except that the correctional officers involved sometimes need to be assigned to monitor what's going on, or on a concert day, a lot more extra officers will have to come. So there's some shifting around of officer responsibilities, which might, there might be some overtime or something involved. But for the most part, all of this artistic and a lot of the educational instruction is run by volunteers, you know. So there's not a lot of expense. I suppose prisons could decide, or states rather, legislatures could decide to budget more money in general. I mean, the Department of Corrections would love that. They're always complaining that there's a shortfall of funding for the things they want to do. For therapeutic, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of the men have to go through different kinds of therapy before they're released, you know. And they complain that it's often pretty limited, you know. It doesn't have a big impact. So to put more money into mental health initiatives in prison would be great, you know. Put more money into the food. The food's not very good. There's so many things that could make a difference in the lives of people who are incarcerated, you know. And in the scheme of things, I don't think it would take that much money. I mean, I always like to look at the defense budget and see how we could trim that a little bit and direct the money elsewhere, you know. But your other question was about correctional officers, is that right? Some of them are fantastic and really understand the value of these kinds of activities. Some of them are not. There's often not a lot of training for correctional officers. And, you know, some of them come in with attitudes that these guys are here to be punished and, you know, I'm going to do my part to punish them. So it really varies. I think the attitude of the warden sets a tone for a prison, you know, and sets the tone for the staff. He can bring in more training for the officers, et cetera. I don't know if that answers your questions, but yeah. Great. Well, are we coming to a natural closing place? Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate it. I do have books for sale if you're interested. I also have my previous book for sale if you're interested in that. So I'd be happy to sign copies of the book or chat some more. I guess I should put my mask on if we're going to chat. This has been such freedom. No mask. Thank you.
Informative and moving and just educational too. Thanks.